Thank you. As was said, I work in the Attorney General's office in Sacramento, and I'm part of the Privacy Enforcement and Protection Unit. We are enforcing on the civil laws, civil privacy laws, laws about how personal information can be properly collected, used, and disclosed. And it includes things like the data breach notification law, as well as some laws related to information security and the use of social security numbers and credit card data. There are quite a lot of them in California. So we enforce those laws. We bring actions against companies that violate them. We also make a very major effort on education directed to consumers. We have a lot of materials on our website, which is easily accessible, privacy.ca.gov. We have on identity theft in a whole number of ways for the different types of identity theft, on safe social networking, on personal health records, patient privacy rights, getting smart about smartphones. There are quite a lot of consumer guides. We also devote probably even more attention to educational programs directed to businesses. And we do that in a couple of ways. One is to go out and speak at events like this. Another is to publish materials, guidance on best practices and safe practices for businesses to use regarding how they handle and manage personal information. So if you haven't gotten them yet, I brought 2 of our guides. They're outside, and if you want to take more than one of them, feel free, so I don't have to take them back to Sacramento. One of the things that we do is companies that have data breaches of personal information. The way the law defines it is the kind of information that requires you to notify people. If it is acquired by an unauthorized person or reasonably believed to have been acquired by an unauthorized person, that's name plus social security number or driver's license number or financial account number, medical information, health information, or the user ID and password or other credentials that permit access to an online account. So that law has evolved over the years in response to perceived changes in the threat landscape. So initially, in 2003, when that law was passed, it just applied to the first categories of financial information, driver's license, SSN, and financial account numbers, because that was the kind of identity theft that we were seeing. That was what we wanted people to be alerted to so that they could take appropriate defensive action. A couple years later, we started learning about medical identity theft, when somebody uses your information to go out and get health care, which has not only a financial impact potentially on you or on your insurer, but also can end up corrupting your medical records and put your life at risk. So we added that kind of information that people should know when that's been acquired so they can take some action. And then more recently, just in 2013, in response to what our e-crime unit, who are our brothers and sisters on the criminal side of privacy and security in the Attorney General's office, they were seeing that criminals were targeting online account credentials because, alas, we all too often have very weak password practices, use the same password for multiple accounts. So acquiring the credentials for one account can enable getting into many, many accounts, including the ones with the most interesting information in them. So we added that kind of information to the breach notice law. So when we learn about data breaches, and the companies have to report to us as well, we look at them in a number of ways. It's kind of a window into what kind of practices are going on out there, what vulnerabilities, what threats are reflected in this kind of a result of a data breach. And in addition to potentially taking enforcement actions, we look for patterns and trends and what sort of advice might be given can help people protect themselves against what we see there. So the kinds of breaches that we've seen in the last 3 years can be divided into 4 categories. They're kind of the Verizon categories. And more than half the breaches are the result of external attackers, like malware and hacking breaches, the kind that you were hearing a lot about from David. About the next biggest category is this physical loss and theft. Somebody stole or lost, it allowed it to be stolen, a laptop, a thumb drive, something that had personal information on it, that wasn't encrypted. Because if it had been encrypted, that wouldn't count as a data breach. And the data wouldn't be at risk, you wouldn't have to notify people. The next biggest category is errors by insiders. Oops, I mailed that whole file to the wrong person, and it wasn't encrypted. Ooh, I thought I was putting that in a secret place on our website, but alas, it was publicly available. Just, oh, I accidentally had the Social Security number visible on the outside of the envelope when I mailed these things out. So, people errors. So the kinds of recommendations we make when we look at those patterns are how to address those particular kinds of errors, the particular kinds of weaknesses and threats that have resulted in data breaches. So it's not the whole landscape of information security, but it brings up a lot of issues. So one of the points that we've been going on and on about for a few years in the reports that we publish, which are on our website about data breaches, is this failure to encrypt data in transit. It's such a simple and obvious thing in most cases about how you can encrypt a laptop for about $50. And then it's not a problem. And you don't have to go through the more difficult process of trying to get people not to put sensitive information on laptops, not to leave them in the car. I mean, those are all concerns because you don't want to lose the laptop. But if you've encrypted the drive, then the data is going to be secure and you're in a much better situation. And yet, it keeps not being done. So I would encourage you to look at laptops, thumb drives, and other ways that people are needing to have information available outside your network and ensure that you have them encrypted. And so don't, as much as possible when you're looking for security controls, if you can find a technological control that doesn't require a decision by the user, do that. In the employee errors mode, again, anything you can do to make it harder for employees to make bad errors technologically would be good. In addition, training is really, really an important control. It's something you have to do constantly. You have to train not just in what your policies are, but why it's important, why protecting your data assets is important to your business on so many levels, to being able to conduct your business, to being able to retain your customer trust, and to the kind of education and programs that you can build into your daily work life actually can help you create a culture of privacy in which your employees come to understand that this data has to do with real people, and doing the wrong thing with it can hurt people seriously as well as hurt your business. It takes time, but it takes persistence and sharing of good information with your staff to build a culture of privacy. And that's really the way you're going to have to address the errors problem, is get them to see how important it is. And finally, while you're doing all these wonderful things to make sure that the worst doesn't happen, you have to be prepared for the worst. If you do have a data breach, the only way you're going to be able to meet your legal obligation to respond in the most expedient time possible without unreasonable delay is to have thought through it in advance, to have a plan, to know what kind of resources you're going to need, to know where your data is, to have a map of your data. I heard a very delightful little anecdote from Verizon at a conference last week in which they were doing some work and follow-up to a data breach of a fairly large company. They're sitting down with the principals of the company, and they have a big diagram on the table of the network, and they're saying, okay, so they went over here, and then this is connected to that, and they're all going, yeah, and figuring it out. And finally, one of the people from the company said, where'd you get that diagram? And they said, well, it was on your system. Well, did you do it? Did you do it? The bad guys had made it. They had mapped the system and left it behind, either by accident or perhaps they were making a point. The company didn't have a diagram of their network. So knowing where your data is pretty darn important and is the first step to being able to protect it. Thank you.